Hey YouTube, I just wanted to make a quick little video today, just talking about something that has recently been affecting like my stream and these kinds of things, right? So if any of you guys know him, there's someone out there named LS who's this like Korean, I guess, LCK caster who also was the coach for like C9. And recently he's been talking about Hecarim since Hecarim has been showing up more and more and more in like LEC, LCK, and LCS and even LPL games. And the problem with it is that the things that Ellis says about Hecarim are completely wrong, and he's completely misinformed. And the issue with this is that everyday people come to my stream, and they come to me, and they tell me that I'm wrong, when in reality, he's the one gaslighting his audience into thinking he's correct. And the issue with that is that not only is he misleading his audience because of his own ego, but on top of it, it makes me look bad, and it makes me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so now we're going to talk about Hecarim as a champion. What is Hecarim's job? He is what is known as a diver. So with Hecarim's high, like base ability damage, as well as his like AoE fear ult and his Z that increases movement speed, the thing that Hecarim actually excels at the most is getting onto the enemy backline. Now, the good thing about it is that what this does for Hecarim is it makes him a back to front champion. So since Hecarim's goal all the time is to get a fear off on the enemy carries, and then afterwards look for plays, right? Nuking the enemy carries and whatnot, then he should never go for a build that doesn't accomplish this task. This is why, if you look, the only times Hecarim has ever been viable at a very, very high level were when he had high-speed one-shot builds. So one example of this is in Season 8, someone named Be Nice to Each Other hit rank 1 playing Hecarim by going Predator with Yumus and Train Force every game full Assassin. And this made him hit rank 1. And then another time that Hecarim was competitively viable was again when it was the introduction of the Chemtank Force of Nature Deadman's build. And what do these two builds have in common? They have very high movement speed, they allow him to get onto the enemy backline, and when he is on the enemy backline, he can just insta-kill carries and delete them. So when I made the Chemtank Manmune build, I just wanted to find a build that was similar to these two in that sense, but that was good for this current season. And that's why I created the build I did, which was the Chemtank Manmune, which now has changed to the Chemtank Death Stance Manmune. And the reason why this build is so good is because it accomplishes Hecarim's job as a diver perfectly. Why does it accomplish it perfectly? I'll explain. Because with the Chemtank, you get extra movement speed, and then when you ult in on the enemy and you get your Chemtank slow off on them, then this also makes it so that they have this AoE slow so they can't run away from you. Phase Rush makes it so that you can lock them down even easier, and with Manamune you have this insane amount of burst on your combo, and with Death Stance you're also somewhat tanky, and when you get the kill on the carry, you can end up getting these health resets that then allow you to deal with the enemy frontline as well. So essentially what I did was I created this build that allows me to go nuke an enemy carry that could 1v9 and then afterwards play back to front, kill the rest of their team and not have a problem with it. The main reason why I don't think Divine Sunder is good and I don't think Train Force is good on Hecarim and I never build these items is because it doesn't allow him to 1v9. If you were to ult on an enemy, let's say Lulu Jinx, and then the Jinx has Gale Force and she Gale Forces away and then you get exhausted, and you went for like Trinity, let's say, Trinity and Death Stance, how could you ever keep up with them? How? If you get polymorphed and now you're CC'd and then you just die, what do? That's why this build is so good, because you can just go in, you get this fear off, and then they'll instantly exhaust you, but throughout that time they're feared for like 2 seconds. Even though you're exhausted, you can still like kite around with phase rush mobility, and then you can look for re-engage angles. So what this build allows you to do is, if you're an insanely good Hecarim player, is you can go in and no matter the situation, you will always be able to 1v9. Because the problem with going something like Conqueror and Divine Sunder is that if I ult on the enemy Jinx and she flashes away, she's never gonna die, and then I lose the game. Doesn't matter if I'm 10-0, doesn't matter if I'm 20-0. All it takes is that. And then people say, but go Frozen Heart second. Okay, if I go Divine Sunder to Frozen Heart, and then the enemy Jinx goes, let's say, Kraken Slayer with Lord Doms, and then she flashes my initial engage, how do I 1v9? I don't. But then you can make the argument of, okay, well, you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be distracting them, so then your team can carry. But this is exactly what I'm trying to get at. This makes Hecarim a team-dependent champion. Going for these Conqueror, Sunderer, Triforce builds makes him team dependent and makes him team reliant. Whereas if you go my build, you are the one who is in control of every single game because you are the one that is able to carry every single game. So this is why I have this like big problem with LS in general. It's just because he'll sit there and he'll say that, oh, Hecarim should be not played in the way that Doaenel plays him because he needs to do this like setup that makes him a really good frontliner. But if a Hecarim really wants to 1v9, he's never going to frontline. Because if you sit there and you're going to frontline, then you just die. You will just die. Because let's say I go there and I'm frontlining, and then I decide, okay, enemy backline is in a good position to ult, and then I go for an ult, and they flash away. There's nothing I can do, I'm just dead. I can never 1v9 a game. And the problem is sitting there and saying, oh, you should do it because, like, it's good in the pro scene, so, like, if the pros are doing, like, this build, then it's good. You know, like, Hecarim's a good, frontliner in the pro scene, right? But the problem is solo queue is completely different from the pro scene. You can never trust your team in the solo queue, and that's why I always tell my community to do the build that I'm doing, because this is what allows me to ultimately 1v9 games. And you might ask yourself, okay, but Doaenel, why does this make you qualified? Because the thing is, at the end of the day, unlike LS and unlike Malice, I've played thousands upon thousands of games. I have played legitimately the second most amount of Hecarim games on the planet. So when I talk about this champion, it's because I know exactly what I'm talking about from a solo queue perspective. And sitting there and knowing my champion inside out gives me the insight I have to create builds and create rune setups that allow me to 1v9 in solo queue environments. That's why when it was the initial item overhaul and everyone was subbing Chain Force on Hecarim, I was one of the only people who started building Divine Sunderer on Hecarim because I knew it synergized better with him at the time. And everyone told me I was wrong. Everyone told me I was bad. Everyone told me I didn't know what I was talking about. And guess what? After a month, everybody switched over to Divine Sunderer. And then after Hecarim was initially gutted, and he was literally 43% win rate, I was able to maintain a positive win rate on Hecarim even though nobody else could, and even though everybody dropped the champion, because I innovated an Inspiration rune setup, which was Conquer with Inspiration and Futures Market Cosmic Insight. And this rune setup allowed Hecarim to be good again, and it allowed him to be decent. And then guess what? After I started doing it, people started switching over. So this is just no different than any other time. But the problem is that now, since I'm more prominent in the scene, bigger creators are using their larger platforms to kind of undermine me and undermine all my like expertise on this champion just to fuel their own ego, to make them seem like they know everything about a champion, to make them seem like they know more than I do, when in reality, how can that even be possible? How can anyone pretend to know more than I do about this champion when I've played thousands upon thousands of solo queue games with Hecarim, and I've even reached challenge with the champion? And what's even crazier is the reason why I never made it to like rank 1 or anything like that is because I only ever knew Hecarim. I never knew the role. When I was playing jungle and I went unranked to challenger in a week as a jungler, right? Literally. It was with a playstyle that it wasn't like I was a jungler. I was just AFK farming my camps every game, and I would take dragons, and I would never gank, I would never counter gank, I would never go for dives, I would never help my team. But simply by being an insanely good mechanical Hecarim player and doing a build that allowed me to showcase this mechanical expertise, I was able to still maintain 65% win rate on Hecarim, even up to challenger. And the only reason that account didn't go to rank 1 is because after that, I single-handedly made NA's ban rate of Hecarim quadruple. It was like 50% in NA, whereas in other regions it was 10 to 15. Why? Because people knew what I was capable of doing on Hecarim, and they didn't want to see it, so they just permabanned it. So now I'll get into why this build is actually good, because you might be wondering, okay, Doaenel, so you've identified that you're the best, you've identified that people are only trying to demean you because of their egos, so how is your build actually better? Let's explain. Hecarim is a diver, and he is also good at AFK farming his camps. Think about how Hecarim clears, think about how he fights. The only reason people auto-attack on Hecarim is because they build Sheen items. But realistically, the champion should never be auto-attacking. He should always be using his enhanced movement speed to look for repositioning, and he should be using the augmented damage he gets for more damage on his Qs. So that's why when I will sit there and I'll E on Hecarim, I always hold it out most of the time until it's literally about to expire, so that I can get multiple Qs off, and since I have like faster move speed, it gets all this like extra damage, and then I can also reposition and dodge abilities and dodge skill shots in a way where I can like win these fights. Whereas if you're pigeonholed into auto attacking, you cannot actually do this. You cannot actually go and like dodge all these abilities and do all these things, right? Now that we've said that he's a diver who farms his camps, we're gonna say, okay, what's the perfect item for him? And the answer is Ionian Boots. Ionian Boots will sit there and it'll give him an early 20 CDR, right? It'll give him 45 movement speed, which then also converts to AD, and all this for only 1,000 gold. So you get move speed, you get damage, and then you get CDR, which lowers your Q cooldown, which is your main way that you're clearing camps, which means that you're increasing your clear speed by an insane amount, right? So we can identify that Ionian Boots are his best buy, just by thinking about it. And then when you go Chem Tank Mythic, what this allows you to do is, since you already committed for an aggressive buy with the Ionian Boots, then you get your Chem Tank to build your base resistances, so that you're never actually squishy. Back in the day, people would go Ionian Boots with Sunder into Sterak's, but if you look at it, you're getting no resistance. And the way they'd make up for this is by going Conditioning, but the problem with that setup is the fact that, again, you don't even get that much resistance from Conditioning. So people would sit there and it would be like 30 minutes into the game, and they'd have 70 armor, 70 MR as Hecarim. And what does that mean? It means if you're going to ult in, and the enemy has flashes or they have ways of getting away from you, you will just get insta-killed. There's nothing you can do, you will just die. And if they have serpents, well, now you're screwed. So nowadays, what I do to counter this is I got Ionian Boots so that I have good early pressure. And then you go Chem Tank, which makes it so that now you have good synergy with your build, because you're making up for the fact that you went an aggressive boot option by going for a defensive mythic. And then what does this Chem Tank passive also do? It makes you a better diver. So think about it. Think about Train Force and think about Divine Sunder. These are items that are Sheen procs. If you're ulting on an enemy 80 carry, how long is the team fight going to last? Maybe 4 seconds? So in that time, you're going to get at maximum 2, maybe 3 if you're lucky Sheen procs off, if you're insanely lucky. So you're sitting there and your damage mythic is doing maybe an extra 400 damage. Maybe an extra 400 damage to the enemy carry during a team fight that lasts 4 seconds. If you get exhausted, you're screwed. If you get polymorphed, you're screwed. If you get CC'd, you're screwed. If they have flash, you're screwed. But what Chem Tank does is it makes it so that now you have better resistances, and also, so you apply this slow to the enemy carry, which makes it hard for them to get away from you. You have base resistances, so you don't just get instantly nuked the second you get onto the enemy carry. And then also, you get this initial burst of damage on your first auto attack with the Chem Tank passive. So it's literally everything that Hecarim needs as a champion, rather than just getting an extra bit of damage after you get a Q auto off. And then what else does building Chem Tank do? It allows you to go for offensive items afterwards. So that's why what I do is I just go Death Stance after. Death Stance or Maw. And then you go into Manmune. And with these items synergized, it literally just makes you 1v9 every single game. There's no team comp that you could play into that, well, I would say that 90% of the team comps that you play into, you'd be able to just easily carry. But then in the ones that you can't play into where you can easily carry, the alternative of going Divine Sunder and Triforce is just as bad. Like, for example, let's say the enemy team drafts Vayne, right? No matter what you build versus Vayne, you're just going to get screwed. So you might as well just commit for a full damage build and hope that you can one-shot her. And that's the thing about Hecarim. The way you actually carry games with Hecarim is by one-shotting the highest priority target and then moving on to the enemy front line after. So the reason I decided to make this video today, in case you're wondering, is because somebody said that LS said that tier items aren't good on Hecarim. They aren't good. But the thing is, it would only take you literally 5 games of playing the champion to realize that this champion has the most mana issues out of almost any jungler in the entire game. And a lot of the times you can't go for plays that you'd normally be able to go for because you're running out of mana. So sitting there and saying things like tier items are bad on Hecarim, building like mana is like, oh, it's not good, you're better off going for like all these other things, it's just completely ill. Completely ill, because you need to go for builds that allow you to nuke the enemy carry. And if you say, oh yeah, but what if you go Frozen Heart instead of Manmune? Okay, how does Frozen Heart increase your damage on the enemy carry? How does Frozen Heart ever make you a better diver? It doesn't. You're diving into the middle of them and you're reducing their attack speed, and now you're hoping that your team can carry and your team can follow up. But what about in positions where your team doesn't? What about in positions where you literally have to 1v9? And then even though you survive for an extra 2 seconds, you just get killed and then you lose the game. So that's the only reason why I wanted to make this video today, is just because I feel like recently there's this like really bad mentality going around of how my build is bad and how, oh, all these other builds are better, just because creators with bigger platforms are saying it. When in reality, the only reason they're doing it is because they can't afford to be wrong. And I understand it, right? If you're there and you make an entire career and an entire living off of being this like analytics guy who analyzes the pro scene and analyzes builds and stuff like that. If you say you're ever wrong about a build, how can you ever go back? Because once you say you're wrong, people will just always question you. So it's almost like you have to die hard commit for opinions that are wrong. And then the issue with that is that these opinions that are wrong then impact people like me who are genuinely trying to help my viewers get better at Hecarim and genuinely trying to sit here and help my community and like everyone who wants to get better at Hecarim get better at him, right? You have to understand that the main reason I do everything that I do is help people become better Hecarim players. It's as simple as that. That's the reason why I innovated the build I innovated, and I told everyone about it, and that's the reason why I push out the Hecarim content that I do. It's to help people improve and help people get better at a champion that I love, versus people that just want to improve their own image and improve their own ego for whatever satisfaction that might bring them. But at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to. If you think the Chem Tank Manmune build is actually good, hit a like. If you don't, well, you can continue your LS sub. But with that being said, I really didn't want to make this video, and I don't want to start any drama, but it's at the point now where it's genuinely affecting people's perception of me. The fact that people are willing to spew misinformation the way they are. And I don't know. I just feel like I had to create this just to kind of counteract everything. But love you all, and I will see you all for the next video. Peace.